Let's bring in two former Trump administration insiders, former Homeland Security, counterterrorism, and COVID advisor to Vice President Mike Pence, Olivia Troye, and former Trump White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham. Ladies, thank you both so much for being with us this evening. Stephanie, let me start with you first. The thing that I can't wrap my head around is why a president who notoriously paid little attention to his daily intelligence briefings, at least that's what was reported time and again when he was in office, why would he hold on to this stuff? Why does he have this stuff around Mar-a-Lago? And you were his press secretary for a period of time. Why does he suddenly care about top secret materials?
Well, your guess is as good as mine, and I'm going to definitely leave it up to law enforcement and the investigation to come to that conclusion. But, you know, there are many things. I mean, there's small mementos I'm sure he kept because he thought they were cool, or he could, you know, just show off to people. But at the end of the spectrum, that would be really bad is if he thought he could ever profit off of anything. And I'll stop there because I don't want to throw around those kinds of accusations. Look, Donald Trump is innocent until proven guilty, and we'll wait until the investigation concludes. But I do believe that Merrick Garland didn't do this lightly. I do believe that this was a buttoned up investigation. The fact that he took such strong responsibility for it really made a lot for me, made me really feel a lot better just as a citizen. So I guess we'll just go from there.
And Olivia, let me ask you about this. A top Republican on the House Intelligence Committee has been very vocal in casting doubt on this FBI search. I want to get your reaction to this exchange that Congressman Mike Turner had this morning with CNN's Brianna Keilar, my colleague over there on State of the Union. Let's watch.
Do you take home documents marked special access?
No.
And yet you're casting doubt.
And you know, quite frankly,
on
you know,
whether
I've been in the Oval Office with the president. I'd be very surprised if he has actual documents that rise to the level of immediate national security threat. These are 2-year-old documents that are in the president's residence. We don't know what's in them. They're not ongoing, certainly now.
Yeah, Olivia, the congressman said himself he doesn't know what's in the documents. Nobody really knows what's in these documents. I mean, outside of the FBI, you know, and perhaps some of the Trump circle close to the former president. And yet you have people savaging the FBI, savaging the federal law enforcement community, accusing them of all sorts of things, planning documents and so on. I mean, it just boggles the mind.
Yeah, I watched that interview earlier when it aired today, and I have to tell you, I was disgusted with Congressman Turner, especially given the fact that he's the ranking Republican on the House Intel Committee, and the fact that he would show just complete disregard for intelligence and national security documents. It doesn't matter what's in the documents, Jim. What matters is these documents don't belong down in Mar-a-Lago, where there's a bunch of foreigners going in and out of the place, and putting potentially national security information at risk. And so that's neither here nor there. And also, I found it preposterous that he would say, you know, that they're 2 years old. That says a lot about what his knowledge, I guess, must be on the intelligence community, because he should know better and understand that in many situations, intelligence operations take a decade, if not more than a decade, to kind of get into place, and sources and methods take a long time to develop. So I just found the entire interview insane. And these are the type of people that are fueling this kind of dangerous sort of narratives, dangerous rhetoric that's fueling violence, potential for political violence across the country, as we're seeing it, you know, directed at FBI offices today, and what we're seeing in the protests outside of the FBI again, well, today, and the event that happened earlier this week.
Right, and 2 years old, I mean, that puts you smack dab in the middle of Trump's final year in office. It's not like we're talking about the Magna Carta or the U.S. Constitution or something like that. And I have a question for both of you. I know, Olivia, you've spoken about finding misplaced classified documents during your time in the administration. And I'm wondering the same thing of you, Stephanie. I'll go with you first, Olivia. Was there just a carelessness about these kinds of documents that you witnessed?
There was, and at times I would see people carrying them around and not storing them properly, or not carrying them properly. For example, in between the West Wing of the White House and the Eisenhower Executive Office building, where you'd see this carried openly. I will say that the proper way was the way that many in the Vice President's office handle it. People would come to me and say, you know, this needs to be stored. He's read it. Please take it back where it belongs. That's exactly the way. But you would see documents. I mean, I saw some in the Oval Office sitting on the desk that were just laying on top, you would think that they would be covered or something. I mean, not everyone has that level of clearance for certain things to access it all.
And Stephanie, what about you? Did you witness any of that sort of thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would actually speak, I would say you and I, Jim, both witnessed that. I mean, he was very, very messy with classified information just in a public setting. You know, I've used a few examples that I cite. One was when we were at the border down in Arizona, but the Mexico border, and he started talking about a lot of the technological advances we had made in our administration, and somebody had to step in and stop him and say, sir, you know, there would be a benefit for you to not say anymore. Also, when he made the announcement about the al-Baghdadi raid and his consequential killing, he also started to talk about a lot of things that were highly, highly classified, and some tactical military issues that made a lot of people uncomfortable. So we saw him do that throughout our administration, and I think that is something that made it so that we didn't have really a culture of compliance. I think it made it easier for some people, not all, because a lot of people did take it very seriously. I want to be clear about that. But there were a lot of people who, as Olivia said, would, you know, look and say, well, he's not taking it seriously. I don't know if I should.
And Stephanie, there's a report about Trump's level of paranoia right now with all these investigations going on. A source close to Trump describing it to Rolling Stone this way. He has asked me and others, do you think our phones are tapped on at least a couple of occasions? Also, according to Rolling Stone, since May, the former president has wondered whether any visiting Republicans or Republicans visiting his clubs could be wearing a wire. What do you think about that? Did you witness that kind of paranoia?
Absolutely. I mean, and Jim, you were a big part of that all the time. But yes, he was always wondering, how did this reporter get this story? Who is leaking? A big example would be the Anonymous book. You know, he was every day asking, who do we think it is? I mean, we would be in meetings about one other topic, and he would want to ask about the Anonymous author. So he was like that in the White House. We were always looking for leakers. I was tasked with that personally many, many times. Find the leakers, find the leakers. As you well know, that was something that we as staff would use and weaponize against one another, to say if you didn't like somebody, you just go to him and say, I think this person leaks. But
Right.
Donald Trump is a master at blaming others for his own bad behavior. So I think that that's just his way of thinking, right? If you do something bad, you're immediately going to just deflect it on everybody around you. And I think that's what he's doing right now. I don't think he leaked his own wrongdoings here, but he doesn't trust anyone because he knows he cannot be trusted.
Right. Well, that is very true. And Olivia, we talked to Jordan Klepper with The Daily Show about some of his interactions with Trump supporters, and I have to show this to you because I know both of you have been to the rallies, have been at events where there are Trump supporters and very rabid Trump supporters, and some of the outlandish things that are said. Let's watch.
Who do you guys see as the current legitimate president?
I don't think we currently have one. If we do, maybe hopefully Trump's running behind the scenes, keeping the military on our side.
Biden doesn't know what he's doing.
He recently just killed the head of Al-Qaeda.
I don't believe it.
Do you think that's just a made-up news story?
Just like bin Laden with Obama.
Clarify who's still alive. Bin Laden?
JFK Jr. is.
JFK Jr. still alive.
I mean, Olivia, it's funny we laugh at it, but it does go to these disinformation silos that folks are in, and on the Trump side of things.
Yeah, and it's very extensive. And well, it is. We are amused by it, but the thing is, there are real world consequences when it comes to it, and the fact that this is why we're seeing what's happening with people targeting law enforcement. I mean, these narratives get started, they grow legs, and the next thing you know, everyone's against them, and they get concerned that everyone's coming after them. And so this is a cycle, and it's and never ending when you have right-wing pundits repeating it, and also when you have elected leaders repeating it. That's why it's so dangerous, because their supporters follow and are listening to what they say.
And Stephanie, I suppose you have no doubt that if Donald Trump gets out there and announces he's running for president and holds these rallies, they're going to be just as big and boisterous and out of control as we saw the last 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah, sadly, and I don't mean to be dramatic, but I think it'll be a lot worse. He's going to run. I think that his ego will be about, not only am I going to run again, but I've gotten away with all of these things, and I will be the Republican nominee. And then if he gets elected, I want to implore people to think for themselves, as your guest Sam Donaldson earlier had said. Try to think for yourself. Like, I was one of those people. I'm not sure I was to the extreme thinking JFK Jr. was still alive, but I was one of those people who really believed in him. And I think it's okay to still believe in a lot of the policies that he was behind, that our administration implemented. But please just think for yourself. If he gets a second term, there will be no guardrails. Think about who will be his staff. Think about the cabinet. Think about what kind of national security implications there will be. It won't just be a revenge tour. That'll be the petty part of him that we're all used to. But he will have no guardrails. And I think that's something for our country to really think about when they're going into the voting booth, if he is in fact the nominee.
All right, Olivia and Stephanie, thank you very much for your time. Great to talk to both of you. Appreciate it.